The hostility between Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and U.S. President Donald Trump is escalating. And this is really interesting. So they have the Mexican government has a lawsuit that is being brought against U.S. guns manufacturers because 70+% of the guns that get into Mexico are from the U.S. because America, baby. And so what they're doing here is saying that in the wake of Trump saying that Mexican drug cartels are going to be classified as terrorist organizations, if that's the case, and these cartels are getting essentially all their guns from y'all, then we're going to expand the lawsuit, expand the charges in this lawsuit against the manufacturers, and really try to make a dent. So I'll give you more details on that in a second, but first here's the clip of her explaining this. If you appreciate the show and you're not yet subscribed, please do. Very easy and free. I'll play it first. If you speak Spanish, you'll understand what she's saying. I dabble. I tried in school. Didn't go particularly well, but then I'll go back and translate it for you just by reading the captions.
México tiene una demanda internacional contra fabricantes de armas y distribuidores de armas.
To clarify, if you're watching this, you can read the captions yourself. I'm just going to translate for our podcast listeners.
En Estados Unidos. Si llegaran a decretar a grupos de la delincuencia organizada como terroristas, pues tendríamos que ampliar la demanda en Estados Unidos. Porque entonces, como ya reconoció el propio Departamento de Justicia de Estados Unidos, que el 74% de las armas de los grupos delictivos vienen de Estados Unidos, pues entonces, ¿cómo quedan las armadoras y las distribuidoras frente al decreto? Tal vez, no sé, los abogados lo están viendo, pero pueden ser cómplices. Lo que nosotros no vamos a aceptar nunca, pues, es la intromisión, el injerencismo, y siempre vamos a defender nuestra soberanía.
All right, so to quickly read what it is that she just said there for our podcast listeners, Mexico has an international lawsuit against arms manufacturers and arms distributors in the United States. If they were to declare organized crime groups as terrorists, then we would have to expand the lawsuit in the U.S. Because then, as the U.S. Department of Justice itself has already recognized, that 74% of the weapons of criminal groups come from the United States. Then, how do the armor and the distributors look in the face of the decree? Perhaps, I don't know, the lawyers are looking onto this, but they might be accomplices. What we will never accept is interference, interventionism, and we'll always defend our sovereignty. What she's mentioning there is some people within MAGA, I think Trump's even talked about it, have talked about a military incursion into Mexico to take out the drug cartels or something. And so she's saying you can't just conduct a military operation in the country without our knowing, without our permission, etc., because we're a sovereign nation. You know, that whole thing. CBS reports Mexico's president takes aim at U.S. gun makers if cartels are designated as terrorist groups. Mexico's president on Friday warned U.S. gun makers they could face fresh legal action and be deemed accomplices if Washington designates Mexican drug cartels as terrorist groups. If they declare these criminal groups as terrorists, then we'll have to expand our U.S. lawsuit. And that's because 74% of the weapons that those groups have come from the United States across Mexico's northern border. An estimated 200,000 to 500,000 U.S. firearms are smuggled into Mexico every year. 60 Minutes reported. And so this lawsuit seeking to push arms manufacturers in some direction or have some liability. But from what we've learned, if this lawsuit is litigated in the United States, I actually don't know the mechanism by which that would be litigated for such a lawsuit, but it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough to get any successful legal action against the arms manufacturers for producing something when what they're producing is legal, right? But then there's just no regard for pumping that many weapons. It's really U.S. law that's the problem. That we allow for the loosey-goosey nature of gun laws and for the distribution of guns and for the purchasing of guns and who has them. And so then they're just flowing all over the place, all the way down to Mexico, probably up into Canada and all throughout our communities. And obviously that's the bigger systemic problem, but that's adding another layer to the hostility because those are Trump's besties. Don't go after them, he'll think. One update I want to tell you about before getting on to something about Canada as we check in on the two different situations there. Evan Barker posted, "I'm growing more concerned every day about how these abrupt and blanket freezes are affecting people. One of my friends who volunteers at a domestic violence shelter in West Virginia is saying that all the domestic violence shelters with women and children in the state are currently full. And typically when this happens, they are able to access funding to move additional women and children to hotel rooms temporarily for safety. But currently the funding is frozen. Women are being turned away who are trying to leave domestic violence situations." From her friend, they said, "I had to crowdfund money to get a mother and her two children, including an infant, to safety. They literally had nowhere else to go." So it's extremely heartbreaking. The random seizing of or freezing of funds, the shutting down of institutions that allocate funds, the mass firing of people, it's having real consequences. Real consequences. We saw veterans crisis line employee talk about a bunch of them were fired. What does that mean for people who need the help from these VA workers? And what's the justification? I guess it's woke, DEI. That's mostly what I've been hearing. Hey, this is awkward. Speaking of world affairs, Trump recently called Spain a BRICS nation, which is, as I've mentioned, an economic organization, and it sort of seeks to compete or seeking to compete with the U.S. global financial dominance and community of countries who all sort of use the United States as the standard. But he recently said Spain was in it and they're not. And he was going to punish Spain for being in BRICS, but they're not in BRICS. And now he's saying, I don't know if China's in BRICS.
BRICS, the BRICS nations, I think that's breaking up very rapidly. We said that if they're going to go in and do anything to undermine the dollar, that includes China. I don't even know that they're a member of BRICS, but they had a few nations get together to try and play cute. And I said, we're going to put a 100% tariff on every one of those nations. And at the mere thought of saying that, I think that's all broken up. That idea has no longer sailed. Now, that would be a terrible thing for our country. It would be bad for the world. They wanted to undermine the dollar.
Yeah, China's not just in BRICS. They BRICS. They're bricked up. I don't regret it. But I finally got producer Cole to laugh. Y'all can't hear that, but I can. It takes a lot to get Cole to laugh. Jaden gives me a lot of pity laughter. Cole, not so much. No. So they're sort of leading the charge there, right? They're a crucial part of it because they're so intent on undermining the United States' economic dominance. And so, yes, they are very much in BRICS, but that's what the C stands for, by the way. But here is, going back to the Canada and Mexico disputes, here is a Canadian who has some thoughts for Trump.
Pleased to meet you. I'm a Canadian, and I can tell you one thing for sure. I'm not going to be a bitch for some big city billionaire. We like our country, and we're happy with our independence. And there's a few things you should know about Canada. For one...
All right, I'm really enjoying the subject matter, the substance of what he's saying. But just one creator to another, we gotta cut this switching sides. I know it's like to keep it entertaining, but I'm really disoriented. For our podcast listeners, every line he's saying when there's a cut, it's the camera angle switches to the other side of his body.
We don't have daily mass shootings, and we'd like it to stay that way. Another thing is, we have universal health care, and that's because we think it's important to look out for the most vulnerable within our society. Canadians are independent people, and we want it to
Oh, he did stop. Wow. He heard me.
stay that way. For the most part, we believe in the climate crisis, and we want to do everything we can to protect the environment for future generations. And sure, maybe we don't have the biggest army in the world or the most billionaires on the planet, but we do have clean air, open spaces, and a love for our brothers and sisters, whoever they may be.
Yeah, but you don't have as many McDonald's as us, probably. You don't have good original American food like tacos. No, I'm not. Listen, America's hella special. So I don't, just because Trump's being crazy, you don't have to cast down that. But I do hear what he's saying about there's all these positives, things that people love about Canada. And so they're thinking, we don't want to be your 51st state. We kind of have it made because they get a lot of the benefits, to be honest, of being our neighbor. There are benefits until the orange man comes in power, but there are benefits and we benefit from them. But then they also do have a lot of cool things like universal healthcare or less mass shootings or, you know, I've never been, I don't think. Have I been there? Donuts, good donuts. They're really nice to each other, apparently. That's probably not true. I always like when people say about a whole country anything, because it's almost always a ridiculous generalization. Like believing, or about a city, people will say, oh, I went to that city, it's really unsafe, don't go there. And it's like, well, which part? Every place, every country has unsafe places, safe places, nice people, mean people, good donuts, bad donuts, right? So I don't know how much to believe about those, but I know people really like it. And so it's not like maybe some other examples you could think of where there would actually be excitement. They're just not even, that's not even synced with popular opinion in Canada, but it is causing a motivation to be more anti-American, right? Because they've always defined themselves. I've heard Canadians explain it this way, that a big part of their identity is that they're not American, right? Because they're sort of American in so many ways. They're North American. They're next to the America of Gulf of America fame, if you ever heard of it. They are great allies, easy travel across that border, and similar cultures. But a big part of what makes them is that they're not American. But that always came paired with a still appreciation for their neighbor to the south. But now that's kind of evaporating, and there's increasingly, understandably, hostility. And it's a bummer because it's unnecessary. It's totally unnecessary. It's accomplishing nothing other than Trump getting meaningless. We're gonna appoint a fentanyl czar in Canada. We're gonna implement a plan we already announced and we're already implementing, but it was because of you, Donnie. Ridiculous. That's it. Share your thoughts. There we go. In the comments. Support the show. Get the members only bonus show by clicking that join button below.